As debate continues on the legitimacy of transgenders, I wanted to offer another debate for people to consider before we actually start the show today. And I recorded this after the filming of our show because some identify only two sexes, right? Christians say the Bible says there's man and woman, and it's externally determined. Is this true? Well, I don't think the answer is as simple as that. Consider this. How in God's kingdom do you explain hermaphrodites? Which sex are they? Who gets to choose? And if external male and female has discrepancies, is it possible for external characteristics to not match with their view of who they are? So we all have these chromosomes and what are called sex chromosomes. Females have XX, males have an XY. And honestly, we actually all start out female. And then after about 6 to 7 weeks of gestation, the expression of a gene on the Y chromosome induces changes that result in the development of the testes. So the production of testosterone at about 9 weeks of gestation results in the development of the reproductive tract, and the masculinization, which is the normal development of male sex characteristics of the brain and the genitalia. But what if this doesn't work the way God planned it? If it is God that declared only two sexes, did God screw up? Or are we confused on the reality of his actual design? Hermaphrodites, for those Christians that believe that God made us perfectly and that no variation is possible, then offer an actual argument that perfection doesn't exist within God. And so there's various different forms of hermaphrodism, right? There's the 46XX hermaphrodism, 46XY hermaphrodism. There's what's known as true gonadal hermaphrodism, and then there's a complex hermaphrodism. So the 46XX hermaphrodism, you have two XX chromosomes and the ovaries of a woman, but you appear to have external genitalia that appear to be male. And this is usually caused by an excessive exposure of the female fetus to male hormones in the woman, right? You have a 46XY hermaphrodism that has one X and one Y chromosome and is usually seen in males, but the external genitalia are either not completely formed or they resemble those of females. And this also has to do with sort of an imbalance of the hormones. And then you also have what's called gonadal hermaphrodism, where they have both ovarian and testicular tissue, either in the same gonad or in one ovary and in one testes. And, the external genitalia can vary in form from male to female to very ambiguous. There's complex hermaphrodism, which involves other various disorders of sexual development beyond those simple ones. This type is not usually associated with a discrepancy between the internal and the external genitalia, but instead the individual shows abnormal levels of sex hormones and incomplete sexual development. So if external genitalia can be confusing, why can the way people view themselves and see themselves not also be confusing? So please stay tuned for our show. All right, hey, this is Eric McCoy, and I am
Lona Currie, and I am the transgender mentor, and this is
Walk a Mile in My Shoes.
All right.
Last week we broke apart, some Christian views of homosexuality that basically required the death penalty. And today being a new day, and my love for sarcasm, we are going to actually discuss the sickness and the illness of my good friend, Lana.
Yes,
Now,
we.
before I show you why something is wrong with him by a well-educated person who speaks for all people that are going through this, I want to explain real quick the transition that you find through the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, also known as the DSM. And in 1980, Lana was categorized as a transsexual and gender identity disorder, right? In 1987, he remained a transsexual, but located under disorders usually first evident in infancy, childhood, or adolescence. Then gender identity disorder replaced transsexualism on the category of sexual disorders, which could fall in children, adolescents, or gender identity disorder not otherwise specified. Then when the DSM-5 came out, he no longer has gender identity disorder, but instead gender dysphoria. Now, Lana, I want to let you know there is something wrong with you, and I want to affirm this with this quick video.
All right.
I think one of the things that's really critical to understand is when you affirm somebody in a cross-gender identity, really what you're doing is saying, wow, there's something wrong with you the way God made you, which is really damaging to the psyche. It's emotionally destructive. It's psychologically destructive. And so I think we need to be aware that when we're affirming somebody in a cross-gender
What are you
identity,
telling people
we're
right
actually
now?
telling them, gosh, there's really something wrong with you the way God made you.
So, Lana,
What?
there is something wrong with you.
I'm glad it's finally been figured out, and now I know. We have, we have, oh gosh, and it always has to do, there's somewhere creeping in all of this stuff is religion. Somewhere we see right under there, pray in Jesus' name. And so many of these organizations that our good friend here, Walt Heyer, is a part of, are organizations that they're greatly involved in something that's so dangerous called conversion therapy.
Yes.
And I know you got some more clips, and I'm really eager to get to them all, but this is what I really want to say as far as Walt goes. And just so everybody knows, we want to give you, just know that there's some things that could be triggering on either side in these videos. What we're trying to do is open up this line of communication about trying to be understanding of all humans in every way and bringing us together as humanity. But Walt did his best to pray this thing away out of his life for a whole lot of years, and it never actually worked. Could we not then ask the question that if you are made this way, could God not have made you transgender?
And absolutely. I mean, absolutely that he could have, I mean, none of us know God's design.
Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And, this guy, Walton, as I've been kind of looking over his videos and stuff, he speaks for everybody.
Yes.
It sounds like.
Yes.
And which is very difficult for anybody to do. I mean, I'm a recovering substance abuser, drug addict. I can't speak for everybody in that realm either.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And so it is frustrating, when you hear people that do speak for all people.
Well, that's the issue with having agendas. When we go to speak for everyone, I think that's where the agendas come in. And we're in the trans community, the LGBTQ plus community, are being accused of having our gay and gender agendas out because we are speaking for just how we want to be treated as human beings. And so when you have the other side come at it and they name our stuff, the gay agenda, the gender agenda, we are not, it's very derogatory in the way that we could equally throw it back and say the hate agenda. The, in what our jobs here, I believe, on earth is to be uniquely ourselves and let our own life and healing speak for itself into the world.
You were saying, you were talking about the therapy, right? The transition therapy and stuff.
Yes.
And, California has actually passed laws, supposedly, that was signed in by Jerry Brown back when he was governor. And I don't really quite understand it completely, right? But to me, it's almost in line of like, you can't force people or therapists, especially with children, can't, force people to go through this type of transitional type therapy. Again, California is a very liberal state in general, with a lot of conservatives as well. And this guy actually talks about that briefly. And this actually was very interesting. And, when we were looking at the videos last week, one thing that I was really seeing a lot was dishonesty.
Yes.
Within the stories that he was telling, dishonesty, lies, manipulation.
Yes.
And I also saw that within this guy too, right? Let me show you a video real quick on this.
Awesome.
I find it just really strange when all of the research shows that 60 to 80% of this population are suffering from a variety of comorbid psychological, sexual, and emotional disorders, and they're denying them access to therapy and telling the therapist that it's against the law for them to treat them.
Okay. I watched that video, and that makes zero sense to me. That to me is a great manipulation, right?
Yeah.
I mean, so you're saying that anybody, you can't go in and get treated for depression because you're a transgender? That doesn't make sense.
It makes no sense.
And he's talking about it in, again, dealing with depression or anxiety or trauma or things like that. That has nothing to do with transgenderism.
It has nothing to do with it.
But that's where he's correlating those stories, because prior in that video, the guy was talking about how in California they've passed laws against that type of therapy to try to change people or transition people.
Right.
That has nothing to do with what he was talking about there.
It has nothing at all to do with what he's talking about. And I've watched so many of this man's talks, and again, I think that the biggest happening in this man's life is that he has a lot of unhealed trauma that he has grouped together, and he has put it under this label as, this is what's made me transgender. It's all been, I'm a victim. It's all been an atrocious happening to me. When, as we will see, later on, even in this video, there were a lot of different chances, and there was a lot of information given to this man that let him know that, I mean, in my opinion, should have let him know that these things are not as one. Right. And I think that's what our issue is, because I never want to see people go through transition. I mean, just because I am a trans man myself doesn't mean I stand on the side of rah, rah. If you feel you're in the wrong body, then get it switched, go under the knife, get your hormones. I'm saying that I have felt like since I was 4 years old that my body and my heart didn't match up. I suffered from a lot of childhood abuse too, but it started after that time. But here's the thing. I didn't begin my gender transition till I was 44 years old, and 5 years into my recovery process from active addiction, because I used to help escape the abuse. I used to help escape the dysphoria, all of those things. But I did not start transitioning until I had healed and gone through my healing process. That's why I started my transition at 44 years old, because I was ready to begin this and explore this in my life, because I had dealt with this other stuff. The problem is when you have unhealed childhood trauma, regardless of whatever label you put on yourself, be it bipolar, be it, manic depressive, be it whatever, you got to deal with that shit, man.
Right.
That shit.
See, I think about this, and to me, this is one of the frustrating parts for me in looking at a lot of this stuff is, there's so much, and, going through, the legislatures of different states and Congress and things like that, trying to pass laws against all kinds of things.
Yeah.
And to me, I look at this, realistically, right? You got policymakers, educators, that are debating the rights, obviously of transgender children in schools. But they have no federal data to answer probably one of the most basic,
Correct.
simple questions. How
Correct.
many trans children are there?
Correct.
Right. And,
Correct.
and I think about, they're putting all this energy and all this focus into this, where we probably have a lot of other things that we could probably put so mumuch more emphasis on.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Because again, like we've talked before about, the educational system that we have is horrible.
Absolutely.
We need to change this system. That would be a great thing to focus on.
Perfect. Yes.
Why are we spending so much energy and focus, on this topic? When again, we don't even really know what the percentage is, of they kind of estimate, that it's like, somewhere around, 0.7% of 13 to 17-year-olds that are living in the United States, probably maybe 150,000 teenagers.
Right. But what we do know, though, is that 40% of homeless youth identify as a part of the LGBTQ, plus community.
Right.
So I think it's like anything, that we talk about now is when we sensationalize something, we drive the fear home. And once we blow it up and make it bigger than it truly is, we get to have an agenda behind it. We've seen it just this last year in what are true COVID numbers and what aren't. If we're saying percentage wise, if we don't look at what the real numbers are, and how can we, we can't necessarily, then we're able to manipulate that into however we want to paint the big picture. And I think that that's the same in this situation as well. We make these big trans issues, even in my state with the bathroom issues.
Right.
We blow them up like that so we can make a big deal out of them so that we can drive our agenda. And it seems like he with the most resources has the biggest platform and maybe wins in this situation. Right. And I'm really, really with you. There's so much more that we could be focusing in. If we're going to talk about children, there's so much more we could focus in on.
Absolutely.
To be helpful and help them be healthy, whole, free thinking human beings.
Yeah. Not just, because like what this guy is doing is he is using that. He's utilizing fear. He's utilizing child abuse.
Yes.
I wanted to show you another quick video on, and I was thinking I'll kind of put this in context, in order of where he talks about him dressing up as a child, and then in another speech, the relationship with the grandmother and calling it child abuse. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to show you these real quick.
I was 4 years old when, in 1944, when I was first started cross-dressing, and what I found out as a child, at that time they didn't know what gender dysphoria was or transgenderism in 1944. It was just a boy who was curious.
Had the term transgender even been coined in 1944?
No, not until nearly 10 years later before it was coined.
So your experience is quite pioneering in that sense.
Oh, it was.
Your
I
early
was
days.
one of the very early ones. And so, it's based on a feeling. You feel like you have these feelings, and then you become attracted to the clothing. And so my grandmother made me a purple chiffon dress that she dressed me in, and she affirmed me. This is what you're supposed to do, affirm them and help them. And
so in that video, right? There's a couple things that really kind of point out. Number one is he's a pioneer, right?
Yeah.
So he's one of the first. Doubt it.
Not exactly. Exactly.
I doubt it. I'm sure that goes way back.
Yeah.
But he also identifies that this is something he liked to do. This was something he did. This was choices that he made.
Yeah.
And then the grandmother made a dress, affirmed him, whatever that means.
Right.
And I think he defines it later as you're pretty.
Yep.
Now, why can't guys be, hey, Lana, I want to let you know you're pretty.
Thank you.
Yeah. Why can't guys be defined as pretty, right?
Right. Right. And this became, so later in his testimony, this became this big secret between him and the grandmother. Now, through his own words, the grandmother is the only one affirming this. The grandmother is the only one supporting this want or attraction to this clothing. Now, when he takes this, he sneaks this dress home and eventually it's found. Mm-hmm. So from this moment, everything blows up. He's now let this secret out because he got put on the spot by his mom. His father is a very masculine cop who gets very angry. So what we see born in this moment is shame. Yep. So now we have, and so we're calling the grandmother the abuser.
Correct.
But we're not, on the other hand, calling the originator of the shame, you're bad, you're wrong, you're different. We're not calling that abuse. We're calling this abuse.
Correct. And I want to show you the video real quick that says this.
The moment you affirm a child, like my grandma did, putting me in a purple chiffon dress and telling me how cute I was, how wonderful I looked, is at the very same moment that you're affirming that young person, you're telling them there's something wrong with them, that you're not right. That is child abuse. We need to begin calling it what it is.
Grandma didn't tell you something was wrong with you. Grandma indulged this little thing between you all. If I am correct in saying, it was the father that let you know right off the bat, whenever this was discovered, that there was something wrong with you. Not because you were female or male or whatever, but because you were doing something that is seen to be opposite of your gender.
Correct.
That, my friend, is child abuse. And when he started to beat you, because then from that, his testimony goes on to say that his father then beat him and did harsh discipline with him. That, now he did utter this in this other video, that to today's standards would be considered abuse. Now, Walt is very careful.
But not then.
Right.
Yeah, because, back in those days, you beat the shit out of your kids.
Absolutely. And that has nothing to do with
that's not abuse.
Yeah. No, that's not abuse. And Walt saying this himself says he's very careful to make sure that the grandmother is placed in the absolute, no holds barred title of abuser. But when we're talking about dad and the discipline of almost having to get this beat out of him and make him more manly, it's almost as if Walt is saying this from a place of understanding, like this is what he should have done.
Well, that's fascinating though, in that context, with the father is technically the abuser. If he's beating the shit out of his kid too,
yep.
That's physical abuse.
Absolutely.
And you've got the grandmother, obviously seeing something he's doing anyways.
Right, because he had a brother.
Says, hey, let's have fun with it maybe. Makes a dress. Hey, you look so cute.
Right.
That's abuse.
And that's abuse. Yeah. That's the abuse, because it sells the agenda that none of this was my fault. See, what I find fascinating in all of this is that there's so much deflection of any of the ownership of any of these things.
Mhm.
I would respect this man's stance. I would respect, and I do respect him as a human being, as in a person. I mean, I got great love for him because I feel like he went through a lot. I mean, he was even sexually molested. And when he told by an uncle, so the other grandparents, when he didn't get to see this grandmother anymore unless the family was around. So this was shameful. I mean, this whole thing ended up being shameful.
Mhm.
And so we have planted a seed of this side of you, Walt, is shameful.
Mhm.
And don't you ever let it out.
Right.
But now he goes to the other grandparents' house where his uncle, who was a teenager, began molesting him. Now, when he goes back and he tells these same family members, the father, the mother, that he's being molested by Uncle Fred, they tell him he's lying again. We're talking about real child abuse that this man has suffered.
Now, did he define that as abuse?
No, no,
The
no.
uncle?
Now, the uncle he defined as molesting him, but he in that same story has compassion for the uncle. He didn't want to come out and say anything against the uncle because by that time he was in the Marine Corps. He was a drill sergeant. His father was a police officer.
Well, that
and now
wasn't
he's
abuse.
a Christian male. No, none of this other stuff
This
is
is the
abuse.
grandmother.
Only grandma.
Wow.
Only grandma.
The sexual abuse, physical abuse are not abuse,
Not abuse.
but
grandma
making
affirmed.
a dress form's abuse.
Yes.
And saying you're
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we gotta understand this too, Eric. Walt has a brother. So if grandma wasn't dressing up brother in dresses,
it was because he was doing it anyways.
something else was going on.
Yeah.
Something else was going on. Right. And you don't become transgendered because you were affirmed.
No.
At 5, 6 years old.
No. That is, in psychology, obviously we study psychology, you can go all the way back to
Yes,
Freud and
yep.
The developmental stages, that we all go through, Erik Erikson,
mm-hmm.
And every big thinker in psychology, always revolves around, at that age, there is role confusion. There's a lot of confusion that goes on. I mean, even just the concept of male and female, what is it? You don't even really know. I mean, at 40 years old, I mean, you're not really going to quite grasp that anyways.
No.
We were talking before about, because he kind of keeps relating to this, like 4-year-olds getting affirmed and I don't think really that, I don't really understand the whole affirmed thing, but like we were saying, like, transition or surgeries or things like that. Sure. That should not happen when people are young. You got to wait till the brain develops and
yes.
And, to be able to figure out who you are. Who are you?
Yes.
And honestly, that who am I question is always an evolving thing. You're never going to get the full answer.
No.
You get into drugs and you lose your values, you lose your morals, and you get clean, and then you try to gain them back, and then you relapse, and that's the greatest way to lose yourself.
Yep.
And
absolutely.
And this is, again, really just comes back to that question, though. Who am I as a person? Who am I?
Absolutely.
And finding that person. And if you are, this is, again, where I stand on this, is that if you feel that you're a male in a female's body and you eventually reach that place, great. Who cares? It ain't affecting my life.
Right. Right. In the scheme of things, if we go by Walt's model, then I would have to blame my being trapped in the wrong body on my grandfather, who treated me as, played with me rough, and who let me ride dirt bikes, and who affirmed me for just being his grandchild, bar it being female or male. My issues really started when the females of my family started forcing me to wear dresses when I wasn't comfortable. What it comes from is the shame that is born inside of all of that. It's the shame that causes the issue. The shame is what causes you to question what's wrong with me. Mm-hmm. It's not the affirming that, oh, you look cute in that dress, or playing like that. It is someone seeing you for, okay, this is what you like, this is what you're exploring, understanding you're a child, you're exploring, and I'm not going to down you for exploring this way. I, like Walt, used to dress when no one was looking in, say, my grandfather's jeans or my stepdad's boots, or put a hat on, but not because of abuse, but because I had already felt shame in the fact that I wasn't supposed to do that. Mm-hmm. I was born a girl and I wasn't supposed to do that. That didn't come from anything.
You're supposed to be wearing dresses and
exactly. And because I didn't like that stuff, I felt tortured to be in it. Then, there was something wrong with me. I think we get into more than we need to, and I know we want to talk about this, more than we need to jump into hormone blockers for young kids, more than we need to jump into, surgeries for young kids. I think we need to jump out of imposing shame upon them from our own places of fear, from our own places of understanding.
We should be imposing, just be you.
Yes.
I mean, that's, I do groups all the time, and always the biggest question I ask everybody, who are you? Tell me who you are, and be you. I also do a lot of educational on family systems, and, looking at what a dysfunctional family is versus a healthy or functional family. And one of the greatest components to it's communication.
Yes.
As a dysfunctional family develops when the needs of the individuals aren't being met, and or there's a violation of boundaries.
Beautiful.
And when you look at the needs, there's loving, like you actually belong to the family, that you have a say so in the family, that you have a sense of privacy, that we encourage you to, to help you find who you are. A healthy family would basically step back and say, whatever that is, great. I love you. I support you.
Right.
I may not agree with you.
Right.
And that's okay, because that's another thing that we want to, educate and teach our kids about, is that, it's okay to disagree. We can agree to disagree, right? Fighting fair within a family.
Yes.
And that I can, communicate. I can trust in you. I can say anything to you. You won't jump down my throat. That's a healthy family. Now,
absolutely.
Is there a real perfect healthy family? Hell no.
No.
Does the Brady Bunch family really exist? No. Although there was something odd about that family, but
well, I thought I was the only one that thought that.
But I used to love that show when I was a kid.
I know.
Marsha. But that's I think the biggest part, though, is that, and I think that if you really love your kids, as so many people say, because this is where things get crazy to me, is that they're like, oh, I love my children. And then you get one that comes out as gay and they're like going, all right, you get the fuck away. I don't want to, you don't, then you didn't love your kids then. Right. I mean, that's
you loved your idea of them, or you love them conditionally.
Yeah. Unconditional. I will say, okay, that my parents taught me this, right? My parents taught me, I'll say I had a very dysfunctional family growing up in a lot of ways, right? My dad was a workaholic. Communication really was non-existent. We never talked about feelings. I was basically taught to just shove down all your shit. If you want something to cry about, I'll give you something to cry about.
Yep.
Highway or the highway, right?
Yeah.
But I will tell you this: my parents throughout my life into my adulthood did show me one thing: unconditional love.
That's
You know,
amazing.
and even through all of the stuff that I went through and all the craziness I did, all the stupidity, you know, my parents were still there, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
And the story also, and this was another thing, you know, the story of my son, right, born a female, raised with my parents. Because, you know, obviously I was in my crazy drug use and
Right.
all that stuff. And so my son actually was raised by them. They are Christians. They, you know, it was something that, you know, obviously they were struggled with a bit in the very beginning, but they love him to death. You know, they do anything for him. There was never a, you're going to hell, you know. And that really was powerful for me when I, especially seeing that with my son.
Yeah.
You know, my parents are amazing, even though they were highly dysfunctional, but we're all dysfunctional, you know,
Absolutely.
aspects, right?
Absolutely.
But that was something really that was cool, was again, going from the Christian side, the view, but not condemning him.
Yeah. That was my grandparents were that way too. And I have to say that was that what that delivers to a human being, you know, I wish that I could have shared with my grandparents the abuse, the amount of the abuse that I was going through, because I think what I tried to numb away so much with that abuse was the painful of, the why me question. Now, as far as the only thing I was numbing with the, being transgendered, even though like Walt, I did not have that title to be able to associate myself as, oh, okay, this is my box, transgender. Knowing that my body and my head and heart didn't match, I wasn't masking that. What I was masking is the shame that would come of that if I shared it. But when I came out to my grandparents as, as being gay, because that was the closest thing I could fit in, having an attraction for women, that was their take. They were Christian, but nothing changed from there. Like there was never a shameful moment. And that was the only real time that I felt unconditionally loved. And for me to lose, when they passed away, I wish they were here now going through, just this gender transition, because I believe that they would be very happy for me to finally be happy, to feel comfortable enough in my skin, and I'm so grateful that your son was able to experience that, because we have to know how amazing that truly is, because not everybody gets that experience. I mean, we're listening to Mr. Walt Heyer and understand that Walt didn't have that experience,
right?
And
I think we had talked maybe about this before, but for a lot of people out there, it is a challenge at first. I mean,
Sure.
Everybody goes through. If you don't understand something, then you struggle a bit naturally if it doesn't make sense to you. And I think that's just being human. And I'll even say this, with my son, was it took me a while to get to the he versus the she, but it was just, I mean, I'd known she for 19 years, 20 years,
Absolutely.
And now all of a sudden we're he, him, he, kind of stuff. And it took a bit. It wasn't on purpose. I mean, it's just, how do you switch off like that for doing something for 20 years and then you just,
It's absolutely true.
And so, so I do want to, and anybody watching the show, I mean, if anybody's going through this with a family member, and you're struggling, it's okay. It's natural. And I've also realized that, you may never fully understand it, and, but you can accept it. That's the
Absolutely.
differences, you know?
Yeah,
And even I don't have to agree with it. It's fine.
absolutely.
But I can accept,
Absolutely.
you know. Now with my son, I mean, I if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. I love him to death, you know. And
And
I'd do
seeing him
anything for him.
happy. Yeah, and seeing him happy
Yeah.
in who he is, that just has to give you a sense of peace, because what's the opposite of that is watching a person live on the brink of suicide or overdose,
Yep.
or the things, or certain death is on the other side of that. Do you mean to tell me that it's more important for us to keep our sensibilities intact and watch that than it is to grow a little bit, expand ourselves, and see someone we love help bring into the world happy?
Yeah.
And whatever that means,
Yep. Yep.
your son decides some other time that, maybe this wasn't what he thought would deliver happiness. And he starts to go back or detransition, which is possible. People don't think that it's possible, but it is.
Sure.
And then, you want to do what you can to see his happiness blossom in whatever way. To me, that's the definition of a parent, a good human being, an ally that
I mean, what are we doing in life? We're all just trying to get through life the best we can.
That's right.
You know,
that's right.
And for me, again, it's just be happy, enjoy life, not be stuck with anger. And
right.
Those feel bad.
Right.
I like feelings that feel good.
Me too. I'm with you. I'm with you.
And I want to show you a video real quick too that kind of portrays going back to the who am I, right? And I found this one interesting.
We've got to start helping the young people. And when people ask for help from me, I have one simple thing I always ask them. Tell me what caused you to not want to be who you are.
What caused you to not want to be?
What caused you to not want to be who you are?
So you should have that already figured out.
Yeah, well, I mean, I kind of look at that in the sense that, like everybody that he speaks to, right, has, if they've decided that they are not in the right gender, male, female, that they are, and if they decide to transition, then why do they not want to be who they are? So he's saying that who you are is not the other gender.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've heard in other talks, he takes a stand and says that transgender is not even a real thing.
Right. Yeah, that it's and again, for me, we watch this guy and he blames everybody. He blames his grandmother, he blames his doctor, he blames the nurse, he blames across the street, right? Everybody else's fault,
Everybody.
And he doesn't seem to really take responsibility himself for his choices, because again, if he made the wrong decision, then he made the wrong decision. I mean, he
made the wrong decision.
I can't say, but he's sitting there blaming everybody else. But how old was he when he did it? He was in his
late 40s, mid to late 40s.
Yeah, mid to late 40s. And then had the transition surgery, and then was 8 years, 10 years as a female.
Yes.
As a Laura.
Yes.
And then decides, I mean, in your 40s.
Right.
I mean, come on, it's like,
right.
That doesn't make sense. You obviously made a bad decision. You obviously weren't living with a very active mind and thinking.
Right. Right.
We've got these things up here,
Yeah, we're supposed to use them. For him, this is what it really comes down to, is in order for him to be accepted back in to this group called manhood, it can't be on him. He can't take responsibility for that, because if he's not a victim, then it's his decisions.
Yes.
And people are going to say, wait a minute, man, but you made the decision. But if I come back to you and I'm a victim.
Yeah, he wants people to feel sorry for him.
He does.
That's how he
and
can
they
utilize.
do.
Absolutely. I mean, he goes on all these Christian radio shows.
That's right.
And they portray,
That's right.
wow, what an amazing man. This guy is
That's
so,
right.
you know, he's moved in line with God and what God made him as, and these horrible things that happened to him that took him to that place.
God healed him.
Yep.
And what it does is it helps stamp their agenda of it being a choice. You made a choice to be gay. You've made a choice to be, transgender. You're making a choice to be all these things. And if you get in line with God, God can heal you of that. But admittedly, Walt Heyer says that he prayed for years for God to take this away from him. And God did not take this away from him. So what I see here, and this is my own personal take on it, is that like many human beings do, all of us do, we fall into the rhetoric that happiness lives outside of us, and we build our identities. I mean, even Walt says in one of his other talks about his job that he became an aeronautical engineer because of the status it gave, because of the money that it gave, the security that it gave. So we see Walt throughout his life seeking happiness externally.
Yeah, absolutely.
And transitioning.
So much of what he does is like the fame part. I mean, you just see him on everything. He's on all kinds of stuff and always telling his story, and to a point that it seems to be that agenda. There's another agenda that's involved in this.
Absolutely.
And it's interesting how he just speaks for other people.
Yes, absolutely. When in reality, I believe what he is doing at this time by not telling the real story. See, I think there's a deeper and more real story that Walt could be telling that could truly help humanity heal as a whole. But because he's still on this outside quest to gain happiness through external circumstances, what he's doing right now is putting people's lives in danger. And I'll say that with all that I am, because these same agendas put lives in danger every day. They drive people back into the underground of denying themselves. And this leads people to become hopeless. And I lived there. I know that very, very well. Like I said, I'm not standing on a podium that says the moment you feel some questioning, run out and get your hormones, run out and have your surgeries.
Right.
But you've got a video that actually tells a little bit about the fact that, there was pre-surgery conversations that Walt had. Like, I believe 2 years. Walt was given options, and Walt was looking for the fast track to happiness. And unfortunately, Walt, like so many, realized that it doesn't live outside of me. I don't think Walt has yet to realize it. But what I hope other people realize, especially in the trans, the LGBT community, mostly the trans, because trans is about gender, the other's about sexuality, that you're never going to find anything outside of you, religion, anything outside of you is going to produce the type of long-term happiness that you think that it will. That's an inside job.
And I'll say this, and I'm going to speculate on this a little bit, but if you're male, if you're female, if you feel you're born in the wrong gender, right? No matter what you do outwardly, right, will do absolutely nothing for you unless you work on the inside.
That's the truth.
You've got to, self-esteem, happiness, loving yourself, caring about yourself, not caring what other people think about you.
That's right.
It's a powerful one.
Yes, very. life-changing.
Yeah. And, I always, like Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, at the top of the pyramid,
Yes.
that's self-actualization, that stage.
Yes.
It's like the be all you can be, that army motto, right? Be
Yeah.
all you can be, and you don't need a lot of friends. You just need the right ones,
That's right. That's right.
I have quality friends versus quantity.
That's right. That's right.
I'm okay sitting by myself alone doing
Absolutely.
stuff. I don't need to be, around all these people. I don't need all the chaos in life. I decide, who I associate with. I have people in my life that love me, care about me, support me, that are there for me. That's it.
Absolutely.
Fuck all
Absolutely. That's right. That's right. No time wasted, enough suffering and time on that, in life. And you got to get to that place. And you're so right. If you don't do, that's what I love about the recovery process, is that's basically recovery in a nutshell, is healing those things that keep you wanting to press that escape button, and to really get to a place where you own your own power, that you own your own mind and heart, and that you don't have to be surrounded by a bunch of strangers to know that you are worthy. You don't need an agenda in order for the world to see you as worthy. And for Walt, the saddest thing is, in my heart and opinion, is that Walt still needs that external attaboy to make him feel worthy in his own skin. That's the saddest part of all this for me.
Absolutely. And that's what he's striving for.
Yes.
He's always wanting that pat on the back, the good job.
Yep.
And that's the thing, and I think you did it right though, because as we've talked a lot, and I really enjoy your company. I have a lot of fun talking to you.
Oh, I love you, man.
And, I see you as, you worked on your inside before you focused so much on your outside.
Absolutely.
And so you had that spot, you had the right place. I think you did it right, because if I get to that inwardly happiness, that joy in my life, changing your outwardly appearance ain't going to do nothing. It's
not. And I almost fell into that trap. Of identity and a lot of trans humans do this as well, because we're just caught up and fixed on that. Once I begin to look like I feel on the inside, then everything's going to be fine. And one of the reasons that I do the transgender mentor is the fact that within itself is a lie, because you don't start your transition and wake up the next day in this new body and it just, all the rest just goes away.
And I'm all happy.
Absolutely. You got years. And if you ain't ready for what's coming in those years where yes, your body's changing and your voice is changing, but it ain't changing at a rate that's stopping what you are emotionally having to go through and be, because you still got to be in your life.
Yeah.
If you're not strong enough to do that, you're going to fall into a situation, like our friend Walt has fallen into, where you maybe weren't ready to handle it. Yeah. And you weren't prepared for what comes along with it. So, it's a dangerous situation on both sides of the coin.
Yep.
Dangerous.
Absolutely. And I want to end with a video here real quick where, we had talked about fear, right? Fear is one of the greatest provokers.
Yes.
Of making things happen.
Tell me what caused you to not want to be who you are. 100% of the time, they can tell me. They can tell me. I'm feeling the pain right now of them sharing with me some of these stories, because even I weep. They're ugly. They're horrible. They're so deep, nobody wants to talk about it. But we better start talking about it. We're ruining an entire generation of young people. And it's serious business. I'm not pulling any punches anymore. And you shouldn't either. Thank you.
Yes, we are ruining an entire generation of
But because of this,
because of this. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
there's
And
a lot.
100% of the time, 100% of the time, they can tell me the horrible story
Yeah, the
that
reason.
made them believe that they were transgender.
Yep.
And it has nothing to do with it. It has everything to do
But the
with sex.
question is, how many people is he talking to?
Absolutely.
You
Quite
know?
a few. Quite a few. And that's what's detrimental. That's what's harming a whole generation of human beings, is because once again, we're telling them, be ashamed
Mhm.
of what you feel, be ashamed of who you are, be ashamed of your confusion, be ashamed if
Right.
you're anything but cis, meaning happy in your own gender. If you're anything but that, be ashamed.
Well, and if you communicate to him, like let's say you decide to reach out to him and, oh, I'm confused, stuff like that, what are you going to get? There's something wrong with you,
Absolutely.
right? God didn't make you this way.
That's right.
And why are you wanting to be not who you are?
Exactly. Exactly. And
I mean,
that
so that's
in itself
what,
is not hurting.
yeah,
That's not hurting people. That's not hurting people.
right.
And he's not pulling out any punches. I just want to hear one time, one interview, in all the interviews, and there's hundreds of interviews with this guy. I want to hear in one of them where he tells his true story from the perspective of taking responsibility. Eric,
Absolutely.
what do we know in the recovery world is that you can't fix something you don't acknowledge about yourself.
Absolutely.
Take full accountability.
That
full
was
responsibility.
that was my premise in my book that I wrote. I talk about, I found freedom when I was locked up in a jail.
Mm-hmm.
And that freedom came from taking responsibility, and I talk
Absolutely.
about that, I had legitimate people to blame, right?
Sure.
I had
Yes.
one time I was arrested. I had weed planted on me by the cops, right? That's how they were allowed to search my car. That's illegal. Second time they raided me and without a search warrant, right? And so I had legitimate reasons that I could blame the cops for this, but I eventually came to a realization, this epiphany, that I wouldn't be here if I hadn't been doing the shit I was doing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Absolutely.
And then I ended up switching it, and I thank God for those cops, because I would be dead,
Absolutely.
And so without them and without their assistance, I wouldn't be here today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I understand that and completely feel you. I felt justified in my hate until the moment that I sat there and I realized that I was giving them every bit of power that I had, and that the hate was not living in them, it was living and destroying me.
Yep.
And that for me to be a creator of my own reality, for me to live up to what was biblically told for me to have, which is life and abundantly, in order for me to have that, I had to drop the blame, and I had to step into forgiveness. And one of the comments I saw under the last thing that I was watching of Walt, all of these comments were, what a beautiful man, how forgiving he is. Never once have I heard him say, I've done the work to forgive this one, that one, even abusive grandma. There's no forgiveness for abusive grandma.
Except for the father who beats the shit out of me. That's okay.
Absolutely.
Back then it was fine,
That's absolutely right.
It's hate is an interesting word too, because if you're filled with hate, you'll never understand love, right?
Never.
Think about this, right? When you throw hate into a statement with love, it's always hate. I love to hate to love.
Yep. Yeah. Yes.
Both of those are hate. Yes. There's no love within that.
There's not.
I thought about that one day, and I was literally thinking, like, hate even either way you look at it, with the love in the equation, I hate to love, you're hating, or
You're
I
hating.
love to hate. Love doesn't fit in either one of those.
Nope. Absolutely not. Absolutely not. And that is
You
the
can't be
very
filled with hate
can't.
and have love.
You can't. So therefore, all of this help Walt is trying to give cannot be coming from a place of love, cannot be coming from a place of understanding. It can only come from a place of judgment.
Yep.
What's wrong with you?
Yep.
Something's wrong with you.
Yep.
And you know, I got love for this man because I see another human being that is still to this day suffering. And Walt has to be in his 70s at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
This is a man.
Well, actually, he was born in the 40s, so
in the yeah,
almost be 8. Well, I
absolutely.
don't know what year he was born. My dad was born
Absolutely.
41. He turns 80 this year. So
So this is a man who is coming to probably the ending times of his life, and he will never have known true love.
Yep.
He will never have known God's love, because you can't feel it if you're clouded by all of this judgment. He's never going to know true happiness. He may have a family that loves him, and that's great. It's wonderful. At the same time, did you ever get to love yourself, Walt?
Right.
Ever in this whole journey,
Yep.
Did you ever love yourself?
And we'd love to have you on the show.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Walt. And really, in all honesty, because we want to walk a mile in your shoes,
Yep.
want to understand if I'm wrong in anything that I have assumed about your life from listening to your story, bring it on home and let me know, because I'm not here to ridicule you. I'm not here to stand against you. We're here to stand with you in a place of walking a journey home to happiness.
Yep, absolutely. I want to thank everybody for tuning into another episode of Walk a Mile in My Shoes. Again, I want to walk a mile in your shoes.
That's right.
And
we're going to walk a mile in each other's shoes. We're
there we go.
To bring humanity back by being more human. That's how we do it.
Absolutely. And so we'll see you next week.
All right.
All right.
Bye, everybody.